Hello, and welcome to the mentorDINO podcast. I'm your host, Caitlin Rossier. I am an architect and founder of mentorDINO. Join me each week as I speak with amazing professionals in and around the architecture, engineering, and construction industry, as we are all part of a larger interconnected community. We discuss everything from career stories, lessons learned, and advice for others finding their own unique career path. Thank you to all of our current subscribers, and if you're new, welcome to the conversation. And if you like this episode, please do me a favor by hitting subscribe, like, or share it with a friend. It really helps others be able to discover this resource and support them on their own unique career journey. On today's episode of the mentorDINO podcast, I would like to welcome Jonathan Stark, former software developer, consultant, and business coach. Thank you, Jonathan, for taking the time to speak with me today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And so we're going a little bit off the typical architect and construction engineer, but you really have a lot of ties in your business coaching and messaging to the AEC industry. So I'm really looking forward to the conversation. But for anybody who doesn't know you or haven't heard of you before, can you introduce yourself to my podcast guests and let them know a little bit about your experience and journey so far in your education and career?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So, like you said, I'm a former software developer. I did software development and consulting for, I don't know, like 15 years, maybe 20. And along the way, I was managing a dev shop, a development shop, software development shop that had about 10 or 15 developers. And when I got promoted to a management role and started doing one-on-ones with people, I was the guy they asked for a raise. So, I knew what everybody was making. And when I realized that we had some people that were making a lot of money and some people who weren't making a lot of money, that the people who weren't making a lot of money were our most profitable people because we billed everybody out at the same hourly rate. And, our best people were making about 100 grand a year, close to it. And our most junior people were making like 45, and they kept their clients perfectly happy and they were slower, and they were just way more profitable. And so I was like, well, if we were going to hire more people, I would want to get people who weren't really that good. It seemed like a weird conclusion. And because it went against my gut instinct of wanting to hire the very best, and we'd be lucky to get some of the people we were lucky to have. So I went on a sort of 2-week mental journey to try and do mental gymnastics to justify to myself that it makes sense to hire these really expensive, good developers and I couldn't come up with a reason. I couldn't come up with a financial reason.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, you're in business, you got to make money or you're not going to stay in business. So I ended up going solo to try and figure out what to do because I skipped over the punchline. The problem, I discovered the problem ultimately was that we were billing by the hour. That was the problem. So you get rewarded for being slow. And I didn't like that. I didn't like being slow, and it certainly didn't seem fair to the clients. And financial incentives are very powerful. So then I went solo to try and figure out what to do because I didn't know what else to do. That's what everyone did in this space. Still, mostly to this day, that's mostly what everyone does. Hopefully we're seeing some changes there. But so anyway, that's the background. I did software. I started managing people, and then I went solo to try and figure out what to do instead of hourly billing. And that was in 2006. So it's probably
Solo still doing software development work.
Yes, that's when I went solo in 2006. So
Got it.
20 years ago this January.
Happy 20-year birthday.
Yes, thanks.
So what did you learn once you went off solo?
I knew it had to be some kind of fixed pricing, but I had been burned, and at the firm we'd been burned with fixed pricing before. You might call it like lump pricing or whatever you call it, project pricing. And, had gotten burned before and it turned out that the reason I had gotten burned was because I was really thinking, how many hours is it going to take to do this project? And then I would mark it up a little bit, like, oh, 15% markup for, I don't know, admin or surprises or whatever. And then always got killed. It felt like I would have made way more money if I had just done it by the hour. So that didn't seem like an option until I came across a book called Value Based Fees by Alan Weiss. And I had actually been standing in a physical bookstore and just saw this title, and I was like, huh, I've never heard of that. I wonder what it is. So I looked into it, and it turned out that was a huge solution to the kind of um, that was one pricing solution that would apply to my situation. There are other ones that I've discovered since then, but that was the first one, and that worked. It worked great immediately. And I won't go into that. We can talk about the basic concept of it and so forth, but that's what happened. Value-based pricing turned out to be what I used for probably the next 15 years.
Yeah, because on the architect and engineering side, there's different strategies people use depending on the project type. Like it could be a lump sum,
Mhm.
it could be percentage of construction, but then you have to know the percentage of construction. Like
Mhm.
you have to know the construction costs
Yep.
before knowing the percentage to figure it out. So sometimes if the client has a loose budget or they're not quite sure, then it's kind of a guessing game
Yep.
or hourly. But then
Mhm.
for smaller projects, hourly can almost be scary because then it's so open ended, which
Mhm.
saves us as designers if we're going to be redesigning a bunch of times, then at least we get paid for those hours. But then it can be
Yeah.
this huge bucket of money at the end for the client,
Yeah, and what
not
happens?
knowing
How does the client feel about that?
exactly. So that's where but I find even myself, if I'm doing a lump sum pricing, I still go do the math on how many hours does that get me to get the project done. Because
Mhm.
sometimes as a solopreneur, I'm fighting against draftspeople
Mhm.
that aren't licensed architects. And
Right.
so I am not the cheapest. And
Right.
I've lost projects because everybody wants to go to an online drafting service, or we're killing each other because we're just trying to race to the bottom to just get
Mhm.
that bottom number rather than advocating for ourselves and
Right.
our value. Everybody thinks you just get the drawings, and that's the only thing an architect is good for. And there's a lot more behind it.
Mhm.
And so, how did you switch your brain beyond that book to
Yeah.
get yourself to think differently, to figure out what value was for you once it came to a number?
Right. So the way that just conceptually the way value pricing works or value-based pricing works, it's the opposite of cost plus pricing, which almost everybody in the service space is familiar with. Where with cost plus, you think, what are your costs? And for most people listening, it's going to be just time, not materials, but just time. And then if they're giving a fixed price, they're going to do what I said earlier. They're going to guess a number of hours. They're going to multiply it by their hourly rate, and they're going to mark it up maybe 15 or 20% for some cushion. And that's a cost based price. So you actually came up with a price based on what you estimate your costs are. Value based comes from the other direction. It's 180 degrees opposite, where it starts with what your assistance is worth to the client, and having you involved to help achieve their outcome. How much is that worth to them? Then you set a price based on that, and then you decide how much time you're going to spend once you have the price. So you don't even think about necessarily what you're going to do, how you're going to participate in their transformation until you already have a price. So so that's the basic concept. So instead of starting with how much your costs are, you start with how much value is in it for the client, in the client's mind,
Mhm.
how much value is there, and you work backwards from there. And yes, once you have the price, your costs come into play because when you come up with a price, say, oh, I can charge $10,000 for this because it's worth $100,000 to the client. They're definitely going to say yes to $10,000. And then you say, well, how much cost do I want to incur to get that $10,000 and still move the needle for the client? So it's the exact opposite of what basically everybody does when they come up with a fixed price.
Yeah. And it can be hard to kind of switch off what you've been used to for so long
Oh
or
yeah,
what you've
very hard.
seen. But then how does that work if somebody else bidding the project is not doing value-based pricing and they're
Mhm.
sending in hourly numbers and you're sending it a different way? Have you had to deal with that situation and educating the client?
Sure, sure. And I'll point people to I have a book on Amazon. It's if you're in the US, it's free right now called Learn Your Lines, and it's about I don't know 80 pages of responses to what should you say when clients put you on the spot with questions like that. Like, "Oh, we'd really like to work with you, but your proposal was twice as much as the next one that we got. So can you help us understand that?" And I would say in the exact example you gave, I would say, "Well, are they willing to stand behind their price or is it just an estimate?" And if it was an hourly estimate, they say, "Well, it's an estimate." And I would say, "Well, if they're not willing to stand behind their price, they might not stick to that price.
Mhm.
It's probably going to be higher. So, you can go with me and know how much it's going to cost in advance. You won't pay a dime more. I'm not going to send you change orders or anything like that. Or you can roll the dice and go with someone who won't stand behind the price."
Yeah, because there's so many loose ends. Like, even when I look at contractor numbers and I try to teach the client, like, if somebody's coming in really low, they may have missed something, and I don't want you to hit a
Yeah.
bunch of change orders and things and surprises that
Hmm.
you didn't have those funds allocated.
Yeah.
So
It in software, I'm sure it's true in every case because in every industry, but it's definitely true in software. Billing by the hour actually is the thing that causes scope creep. It is a big contributor to scope creep because it doesn't require you to find out first what the client wants, like the goal that they want to achieve. What ends up happening is you have a conversation up front about how much scope you think there is because you want to calculate your costs or estimate your costs. So you're asking them about all these things that either they directly are asking you to do or things that they deliverables they want from you that you then translate into time. And you haven't so you have all those conversations and then you give them the estimate and then it always ends up being low for a couple of reasons. One being that you can't uncover everything in a hour-long sales interview. In software for sure, but maybe for you
mhm.
too. You can't uncover everything, so there are always surprises that are unaccounted for, uh, and you don't really know what their ultimate goal is. So if you have, we can try and come up with examples for the architecture space, but certainly in software, you know, I always when I was coming up with these hourly estimate types of proposals, I never once asked the client like, "What are you going to do after we're done? Like, what is the desired outcome here?" And if the desired outcome of the software that I was building for someone was to streamline internal processes in their back office, that's one thing. If it is to help ensure, to create a client portal to help ensure that their biggest client is maybe, say, the Home Depot or something, they're afraid they're going to lose Home Depot and their other big clients because their customer service is not great and they want to create a self-serve portal and that's what all the clients want. And so it's a very different I'm going to approach that system even though I might be doing the same kinds of I would be doing the same kinds of things, but the desired outcome and in fact the desired outcome will in fact inform the way I would build it if I know how it's going to be used once it's done. So, if I'll just make a stupid example, but if somebody came to you and said, "Can you design a structure for me?" You'd be like, "Well, yeah, I can, but I need to know like why." And
Yeah.
then if they started to describe like, "Oh, okay, I want it to be 8 feet by 12 feet, and I want it to be have 8 foot ceiling, and I want the roof to be pitched like this," and they're basically doing your job for you, and they're telling you all these details. This is exactly how it happens in software. People come to you and they say, "I want this button over here, and I want this." They're basically designing it for you. And if somebody did that to you, I'm sure you would build this thing differently if it was going to be a shed or like I don't know, an ADU or how is this going to be used? Because I don't even know what foundation to lay if I don't know how you're
Mhm.
planning on using it. So if you get to that, if you don't ask those questions up front and you just turn on the meter and start billing, then it's no surprise when there are a lot of changes and a lot of surprises because you didn't ask where where they wanted you to end up. It'd be like getting in a cab or an Uber and saying like, "Just drive, and I'll tell you when we're getting close." And you're just kind of not randomly driving around, but well, they probably want to go to the airport. They said something about a flight, so I'm going to drive near the airport and see if they're like, "Yeah, yeah, turn right here, turn left here."
Yeah.
So they end up micromanaging you. They end up pushing you all over the place. You end up doing a lot of work that gets thrown away. And so, of course, the scope creeps and they end up going either over the estimate or maybe even over their budget, which makes them very angry, as you pointed out earlier.
Yeah. And probably another example is a lot of the time clients will come to me and say, hey, this is what I want. And they even have like sketches on graph paper,
Yeah,
but their proportions are way off. And so it's, this isn't going to work. This isn't even going to flow right. You don't have the sense of scale from my expertise on understanding how the space gets laid out. But then I've got the better questions and tools to learn how they want to use the space and what they're doing.
right. Hmm.
And so a lot with engineering, as much as from a software developer, if you don't know the goal, then maybe that button is useless. And it's like, well, you're sending your customer down a weird path. I can actually do this
Yeah,
in 2 different clicks, or here's something new that we can do that may actually solve 3 of your problems in
right.
1 click that they may not have known even existed.
Yeah, because they're not the expert. That's why they're talking to you. So for them to kind of, you know, educate themselves or learn in software, they used to say, well, I know enough to be dangerous with, this software. So shouldn't be that hard. Like you can just, but you're better at it than me. So it shouldn't be that hard. Just take these drawings that I have and make it official kind of thing.
Yeah.
And those are usually pretty bad clients. Like those are not great clients to bring in. Sometimes you can sort of turn it around like you just described and say, well, you know, I'm confused because this seems like it's supposed to be a patio situation, and it, how would you get out to it? How would you bring food in and
Yeah.
out? And they, oh yeah, you're right. I forgot the door or whatever.
Yeah, or
And
forgetting that people exist and we need
yeah,
like a zone to
yeah,
move.
right. And so,
So,
so sometimes you can turn around clients like this when you ask a bunch of really smart questions and they're like stumped and they're like, oh, wow, I really don't know what I'm doing. So, okay, so are you going to let me drive or are you going to keep your hands on the wheel the whole time? And if they're going to keep their hands on the wheel, just let somebody else deal with that. But sometimes you can turn those people around. But the I think the best move is to attract people who would never do that in the first place. You want to attract people who view you as like the one and only genius of some particular thing that they really want, and they would never condescend or presume to even have an idea of what it'd be like me like, okay, I'm going to design a space shuttle, it's going to be like this, put this here, put this there, like it'd be ridiculous.
mhm.
So in your so we're about, this is, I don't want to guess the question next, so I'll just stop there, but those kinds of clients are, they can be trouble.
Yeah. And so I know you're on the mission to get rid of the hourly billing.
Yeah.
Why do you believe hourly billing is so harmful to the practice for architects and engineers? What is it doing to our bottom line?
Well, first of all, you're putting an artificial limit on your income because there's only so many hours in the year. So why would anyone do that? It doesn't make sense to start a business that caps out at like $250,000 a year or whatever, if, however many hours you want to work times your hourly rate, time, minus unbillable time. And it's not that high from a
Mhm.
business standpoint. It's like an okay salary, but it's not a great business model. So that's a big thing. The other big thing we've kind of touched on, but I'll say it out loud. It misaligns the financial incentives. So it's better for your client if you finish faster, and it's better for you if you take longer, financially speaking. And financial incentives cannot be ignored. There are other incentives like, your professional standards and your relationship with the client and other things. But if the financial incentives are misaligned, you're in big trouble because it is going to prevent you from thinking of clever, fast ways to solve their problem in a way that they didn't even ask for, but is way easier for you, just as valuable or more valuable to them. And so you can set a price that's just as high as you would have had for the much harder thing. So you just won't think of it. Um, Other things about hourly billing, it creates trust fractures. So if someone comes to you, maybe you're in the midst of a project and a surprise happens and you're like, oh, we were gonna, I don't know, this is probably a bad example, but oh, we were gonna put the pool here, but it turns out there's like a rock outcropping under here, and we're gonna have to re-engineer the whole thing. or put the pool somewhere else. It's like a surprise that happened. And they're going to be like, and you recommend doing it in a way that it's going to take you a lot longer. So even if you are doing everything you should be doing, you're basically saying to them, there's a surprise, or I was wrong, or I need to do this in a different way. So I got to put in more time. There's going to be this part of their brain that's just like, well, why do I have to pay for your mistake? Or why do
Hmm.
I have to pay for this thing that you changed your mind about? So it creates this like, they're wondering, clients can wonder like, well, why is this taking so long? Or why didn't you know these things in the first place? And they can start to doubt that, you're actually working as fast as you can. And you see this happen when you start to get close to the estimated hours, and it's like you're obviously not done yet, and you've billed the 100 hours that you thought you were going to bill, and you're only halfway done, and they start to micromanage you. And they say, well, how long did that take? Why is that taking so long? This took you half as long the last time you did it. So that's a drag. It's bad for the relationship. It makes them trust you less. And then very closely related thing is, when it starts to get that way, there's a big incentive on the professional, the seller, to cut corners, to hurry up, because the client's starting to get mad. Even though there's like a more correct industry standard way to do something. I don't know, if when it comes to licensing and mechanical engineering and things like that, there's um, rules and regulations around this. You could really get in trouble for cutting corners, but I know people do it all the time. In software, there is no licensing body, so people can cut corners as much as they want with no real penalty. So even if you're the most it's almost especially when you're a really ethical person who's trying to do right by the client, and you want the project to end on a good note, you can start to cut corners because you don't want to send them way over budget because you feel bad, and you end up not doing the thing that in your professional opinion would be the most right thing to do. There's like a dozen problems with it. It's horrible.
Yeah, because you either are going to go down the path of you're still going to produce the quality that you want in your work, and you're going to lose out on any additional funds if you can't charge them more hours. So you have that I feel bad and I just want to do a good job and help somebody
Hmm.
personality,
Yep.
or you can cut corners on drawings. You cannot put enough information on the drawings for the contractor to fully understand, which is unfair to the client because it's going to leave more unknowns in construction. But
Hmm.
it happens even when firms are understaffed and we physically don't have the humans to complete the hours you have on a project. So even if you complete a project in under the amount of hours you had allotted, if you don't have the manpower to complete those, then the documents don't get to where they need to be to have a strong outcome before it's handed off to the contractor. So it still hurts the owner in some way because it's
Yeah.
the unknowns get moved
Hmm.
and the decisions don't get made whenever they should be getting made if you're
Yeah.
cutting corners. Or
Right.
the firm or solopreneur loses money because they're on a time clock.
Right. Yeah. And I think this is what you said, but it might be slightly different. Uh, the really people pleaser types will do it the right way anyway and just not bill for the time. They'll just
Mhm.
eat the time, which is not sustainable. It's very nice that someone might do that. And software developers do it all the time. It's just like, I just finished building this thing and I realized I should have done it in there's a better way I should have done it that's much more elegant and cleaner, be easier to maintain. I'm just going to redo it. I'm not going to bill them because I basically did it wrong the first time. When you give a fixed price, a value-based price that has a lot of margin, you can indulge all of your professional standards to the highest level if you want. It's up to you, because there's no penalty for the client if you do it.
Mhm.
So that was one of the things I noticed right away, was when I'd be doing something by the hour that I knew I could have done a crappier way faster, I would be like, oh, I'd be under this pressure to really do it the right way, but as fast as I possibly could, because I didn't I didn't want to have to explain to the client why I did it this way or why it took so long. So I just really grind on it. And sometimes you just can't because doing it, air quotes, the right way would completely blow the estimate or blow the budget. So having a value-based fixed price takes that away. And it's one of the things that, for this reason and others, it's way more relaxing. The
Hmm.
client's super chill because they're not, they don't have like this leak in the bottom of their checking account that's going to you every week or month, with no end in sight. It's just like it's going to be $10,000 or it's going to be $100,000, whatever it is, and I'll be done as soon as I think it's up to snuff. I'll be done as soon as it's like awesome. And they're like, "Great, have fun, go do it. Let me know when you're done." Which maybe is different on building projects, but in my experience, the there's a lot of waiting around these, like a building, like a house or a commercial development or whatever. There's a lot of like, oh, we're waiting, we're going to order the equipment. And it's going to take forever for the HVAC stuff to get here anyway. So there is time to kind of indulge the sort of artistry of your craft without penalizing the client because you took extra time to like make it really amazing and really beautiful, or the diagrams are like completely filled in every possible question that the contractor might have. So anyway,
Yeah.
there's so many benefits to not billing by the hour.
Yeah. And I think really architects in general just have that personality of they're going to do work for free. I I see that all the time, whether they're an employee and they feel bad that they have to redo some work, or they are up
Right.
at night trying to just complete a task. And even just getting an employee to log the hours you worked. Even if your firm is going to charge hourly, if you don't log the hours, then the firm's not going to learn that they should have charged more hours to begin with.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so you
yeah.
may blow through things, but then you underestimate, and you're just going to underestimate the next project.
Yeah, there's no, you're right. There's no feedback loop to improve your ability to estimate your costs. So you're always just like, you might be the most amazing architect in the world, but are you amazing at estimating? Why
Probably
would you
not.
be? There's no, right, probably not. There's no feedback loop. There's no incentive for you to get better at it. Because in fact, the financial incentive is for you to be worse at it, because then you end up sending an estimate that turns out to be a lowball estimate. You land the work, and then, $10,000 into the project, we find out that we're only halfway done. The estimate was for 10,000. It's going to probably be 20. Sorry about that. And so now the client is in this horrible position where they're like, well, if I'd have known it was going to be 20, I wouldn't have hired you in the first place. But now they're into it. And so
Mhm.
changing their mind now is like in the middle of the race. You can't change the horse. So what do they either they have to like hope it only goes over budget a little bit, if it gets out of control, which sometimes it does. I've seen people get fired over it. I've seen on both sides, the client and the developer. I've seen lawsuits when something went so over budget that they were like, "Forget this. We want our money back," and they lawyer up. It can get really bad because because the client i- has to make a buying decision based on your estimate. They have nothing else. They have to treat it like a price. But the person who wrote the estimate is like, this isn't a price, it's an estimate. It could be much more than this. It could be less than this.
Mhm.
It never is, but it could be more. And it doesn't matter when it comes to that point when the billable hours have hit or exceeded the estimate and you're not done yet. Clients are upset, rightly so. And I don't know. But to the point, you're not going to get better at estimating because you weren't punished for being bad at it.
Mhm.
If you gave a fixed price for $10,000 and you're like, oh man, I should have charged 20 for this, that hurts. And you're going to remember that next time around. You're not going to be so optimistic. You're going to ask different questions. Ideally, you'd ask outcome-based questions and not like, input type stuff like how many drawings do you need? When do you need the stamps by? Blah, blah, blah. Like all of this sort of tactical detail stuff. If you focus on the outcomes, like, okay, you want this to be done in time for next summer so that your grandkids can come and spend a week at cousins camp at your house. And yes, that would be a dream. Okay. and you just operate on that basis. And like, how do you want them to experience the space and all of that stuff? And like I said before, an ideal buyer is not going to get in your face about what kind of materials to use, or like, they're going to let you do your piece. And and you are it's on your it's your responsibility. It's the risk you're taking, is to actually deliver on that, your piece of that. So it's I mean, we could get into some specific examples, probably make sense for the audience. They could understand a little bit better. Like, we could
Yeah.
workshop some
Um,
situation you're in, or
yeah, but before we do that, I want to circle back on one other point you made with hourly, and it's the stress side of it. So
mm,
even if the client's unhappy, I've built a project where I was hourly and I felt stress just having time to think.
mm-hmm,
Whereas another project that is more aligned with the value-based pricing, and I was very thrilled that they hired me, but I have time to think. I had to
mm-hmm,
do an additional iteration that I didn't think I would need to do, and I had the bandwidth to do that, and I didn't feel like
exactly.
I was penalizing the client to,
Yep.
"Hey, we're gonna have to work through a couple more things," or, "Hey, we're a little over budget. Let's value engineer it down." I don't have to charge the client additional money because I feel like I'm
Mm-hmm.
still plenty within my range on that
Yeah.
project. Whereas the other project that I was doing hourly, I had my program crash and I lost probably 2 hours of work. And I'm like, ugh,
Mm,
crap. Okay, now I have to do two more
that's a
hours of
good one.
work. Do I
Uh-huh.
charge for that additional
Right.
2 hours?
You put in the
But
time.
I put in the time. And I can't
That's
remember
a
if I
good one.
actually charged them for it, but it's,
Yeah.
and we did additional iterations over there, but they paid for the additional iteration. So I got paid for it.
Yeah.
But we ended up being a little bit higher than the amount of hours I thought it would take me, but it was some of those more iteration times we needed. Then they ended up needing additional help with going through the permits to make sure they did it right, which I've got no problem helping somebody because they
Mm-hmm.
often don't do this every day as much as you don't want me to fill out all
Yeah.
the paperwork because it's admin time you don't want to pay for. But if you have questions, I'm more than happy to help. But then I felt bad. I'm like, well, theoretically, I need to bill you another half an hour or an hour because I helped you. Whereas this other client where I can breathe, I
Mm-hmm.
feel like I can give as much as I want on the project to get the project done and make
Yeah,
sure
it's up to you.
it's done right, it's the quality I want, and we can do the iterations and workflow. We're starting to get to the schedule time that I need to be done so they can start construction,
Mm-hmm.
but there was time to breathe in there. And so that
Yeah.
was something I learned going off on my own with just, oh, I don't want to bill hourly to somebody because I feel bad. And
Yep.
I almost need somebody else to tell me stop feeling bad and charge them. But if I don't have to have that feeling, um,
Yeah, my
yeah.
experience was
Anyway.
exactly the same. The first year I went out, I couldn't believe how relaxing it was. It is exactly like you said. It felt like you could breathe. You could do what you thought was the right thing to do without penalizing the client. If your program crashed, it would be, I mean, it's on you. You
Hmm.
have backups, save it more often. It's not their fault, right? And so all of that stuff just magically goes away. And and a lot of freelancers, it doesn't matter what they do, but a lot of freelancers think that clients are super concerned about deadlines all the time, and they're awful, and they're constantly checking in on you and micromanaging you. It's because if things take longer, it costs them more. It's surprising. I thought clients were just always like in this urgent mode and always had these deadlines and everything. But then when I switched off of hourly, like 90% of that stuff went away because the deadlines were all fake. It wasn't
Hmm.
like a real deadline. It was a budgetary thing. They said, well, if this goes past October, like, that'll mean that the
They do the
billing,
math.
yeah, right. The billing went way out of control if it takes that long. So it's amazing how chill it is once you actually imagine, gave someone a price for the thing that you're going to do. It's not crazy. Everything else has a price. You buy a lamp or a car or whatever, it has a price, and it's the price before you buy it. You know what the price is. So when they buy something when they commit to paying for something without knowing the final price, it's very scary for buyers. So that's why they turn into these micromanaging monsters sometimes, because they're terrified that they're going to go broke because you're bad at estimating. You might be great at your job, but if you're not great at estimating, they are taking the risk of you being a bad estimator. So yeah, you can't overstate how much chiller it is to work in this fashion.
Yeah. How do you find, I don't know if you guys have this on the software development side, but for architects especially, a lot of the times the smaller projects, I'll get outbid to remote drafting services,
Hmm.
which probably
Yeah.
has one stamping architect, and hopefully they get all the requirements for your particular region, but they're not going to be there with you on site. They're not scanning things. Or other architects just pricing really low that I'm like seeing some of the numbers. I'm like, how are you making a living? Like, what are
Yeah.
you doing? So,
Yeah.
do
Or
you
having someone in
have,
India do all the drawings.
yeah, so when the profession is like a race to zero,
Hmm.
how do you compete with that value pricing to, I don't even know if it's building up the profession so they change their mindset, or if
No.
it's us communicating to our clients, because they also don't really understand what an architect does. A
Yeah.
developer, there's a whole screen of code, and it's usually gibberish to most people until you
And
actually understand where the layers are. But it's
yeah.
a little bit easier. That's, hey, a bunch of code, and it comes up with a website or whatever program you're making.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
So the problem that you're pointing to is true in every industry. It's the same everywhere. It's like if we're racing to zero, you know, if everyone's racing to zero, like how am I going to get away with having premium fees? And and so the things that you listed are things that people think, like, well, what if I educate the client about how much work I have to do in order to do this the right way? I've found that to not be effective. What if we level up the whole industry with some sort of, maybe the trade association does like a marketing campaign for like the value of architecture? I have not seen that work. The scale needs to be too big for that to work, I think. The thing that works reliably is to be meaningfully different from everyone else. You have to stand out in some way that is different. And I don't mean like the barefoot architect and like some kitschy personal brand thing. I mean, you need to be different in a way that it matters to your buyers. And that usually means picking a specific niche to focus on, a particular kind of project or a particular kind of buyer. Or it could be in your case, I would say a very specialized kind of design. So if you became well known, or someone listening became well known as like I saw an article recently in the local monthly about, let me see if I can get this right, uh, an architect who designs prepper sheds. So like sheds for preppers. And so a prepper is like a psychographic. It's a person who's like preparing for doomsday or whatever. And they've got particular wants, needs, worries, fears. And so someone who serves that person, whether it's an architect or a software developer or somebody who makes gunpowder, they can speak directly to that person and be meaningfully different to that person from like everybody else. Or if not to focus on like this theme, but like billionaire bunkers. If you were well known for making bunkers for billionaires, you could probably name your price. And if there's no one else doing that, and you're the one and only, then no one's going to take that to some like online drafting program. They're going to
yeah,
find the person who they read about in the in-flight magazine that does this one particular thing very well, or it's like the main thing that they talk about in their marketing. You have got to be different, because if you're not different, if you go into the store and there's a bunch of apples, you go to the grocery store and there's a bunch of apples laying there, and one of them's $2 and one of them's $1, and you see no other difference between the two apples, you're going to buy the $1 apple. But if you go in there and there's a $1 apple and there's like a $5 watermelon or something, or like something crazy, like some crazy fruit you've never seen before, you're not going to compare those two things. It's the only one there, and there's a bunch of people who look like they're going to buy it. You're going to grab that like crazy watermelon thing and be like, I want to try this. So if you're not different, you're gonna compete on price because it's the last thing that a buyer understands. It is a meaningful signal about, um, if they can't tell the difference between this architect and that architect, they're gonna pick the cheapest one, or usually the second cheapest one in a list of 5.
Yeah, because at that point, if that's the only differentiator, then that's the only differentiator they have to use to put people up against each other, if that
Yeah,
makes sense.
you gotta give them a different one. If you
So when
don't
you're
if you Yeah, go ahead.
I guess when you're coming up with your value pricing, it
Mhm.
feels it feels almost like you're shooting a dart in the air and hoping that it sticks. Like, how do you form that number to feel confident behind the number
Mm,
that you give
yeah.
on the value without feeling like, "Oh my god, I gave this number. I hope it works, but now I'm really afraid I way overshot it." Like, all those
Oh,
internal thoughts you start to run when
right.
trying to figure out what that number is to identify the value.
Yep. So the only way to find out what it's worth to the value is what it's worth to the client. And the only way to find that out is to talk to the client. In a service business in our space, there are other ways to do value pricing with software and stuff, but that's not what we would do. The only way we can do it is to talk to the client. And you find out roughly in the ballpark what what their desired outcome is and what it's worth to them. And you're not going to probably do the whole thing, you're just contributing a piece to it. So I would take the value as a rule of thumb, not a law, but a rule of thumb. I would start off using what I call a Goldilocks pricing curve. So if this outcome, whatever it is worth $100,000 to them, let's just pick a number at random. But you're not picking it at random. You got it from the client or the
Mhm.
prospect. So you're not just throwing a dart. You actually uncovered it with them. You threw a series of questions that you would, I call the why conversation. You ask these questions and you would find out why they would hire someone like you. Why would you hire someone expensive like me? They give you the reasons. Why do you need to do this now? They give you the reasons. Why not do something else instead? They give you the reasons. And if you go through a series of questions that fall into those 3 categories and you find the answers to all those things, you're going to be able to have a rough estimate of what the whole thing is worth to them. And then I would probably give them 3 prices, but the first price would be 10% of that total. So in this case, it'd be $10,000. And then I would say to myself, what can I do to help them get closer to their goal, this desired outcome? How can I contribute to their transformation, or how can I contribute to this outcome for $10,000? And I would say to myself, what would I be I would be so glad if they picked this. I'd be jumping up and down because I can do a really good job in a weekend and get this done. Or if I wanted to go nuts, I'll spend a whole week on it for the $10,000. And then if it turns out that it takes 2 weeks, you're still like, well, I made $10,000 and I worked like 10 hours a week for 2 weeks. No big deal. Then I would also come up with a price at 22,000 and a price at 50,000. I would do the same thing. So at those 3 price points, what could I do to help the client to contribute to the client's desired outcome? And, at each level, you can contribute in different ways. So they're incremental. So you can either pick the good way, which is $10,000. You can pick the better way, which is the good way plus some other stuff. Or you could pick the best way, which is all 3 things, do all 3 things for this $50,000 price. And so it's not really throwing a dart. It's
Mhm.
basing your prices on what it's worth to the client. And then if you do it that way, you know what their desired outcome is. So you have a way to control scope. You can be super chill about doing it the way that you think it should be done and not worrying about billing the client for it. And you can tell a compelling story of why these numbers make sense because of what it's worth to them. And this is way less. If they pick the $10,000 one, that's way less than what the whole thing is worth. And you can say, well, you really want to go with me for these reasons. You have to do it now for these reasons that you gave me. And this is the right way to do it because of, we explored 3 other ways they could do it, and those aren't acceptable. So you can tell the story, give a fixed price, and it's still important that you stand out from your competition because your competition can still undercut you if they don't think there's really any difference between the two of you.
Yeah, and I guess it'd be changing the value you bring at those 3 levels. So if
Yes.
I
It's
compare
usually
it
your
to architecture, it's like, okay, you want some help, but you really just need a permit set of documents. You generally know what you're doing versus maybe you really need help with finishes and you want for a home, I can do lighting plans and
Mhm.
get into the nitty-gritty details so we really know what's going on.
Yeah, or
And
it could
maybe
be
that
at the
top tier is realistic renderings and bringing on engineers to
yeah.
really hone in on
Yeah,
every
where the
detail.
duct's gonna go, is or this actually gonna be load balanced properly, and all yeah, you can just
Yeah.
it's up to you. It's I actually find this stage of the proposal writing process really fun because I wouldn't have talked to them very much about the scope of what they wanted me to do and the deliverables they wanted. I'd be like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, you're gonna get what you need to reach this outcome. So let's talk about what's gonna happen after we're done. Like, what does the world look like after we're done? What's the first thing you're gonna do with this software?" And kinda get them focused on the home run already having been hit and say like, "Okay, I know where the bullseye is," to reuse the bullseye metaphor. I know where the bullseye is. I know what I'm aiming for in terms of what the outcome how they wanna feel when I'm done. So, okay, what are some fun ways I could, if my budget was $50,000, what are some fun ways I could help them hit that bullseye? Or like, if I had $120,000, what could I do? And this can be a little bit threatening to your identity when you first think like this, because it might include things that aren't in your wheelhouse, but need to be done. So you might bring on an HVAC contractor or an engineer, mechanical engineer to help you validate that, the heating and cooling is going to work in this, whatever. So, or to shepherd it through the approval process, or um, to walk the site during the
Mhm.
construction to make sure that everything is going as planned. Like that could be a top tier option. So I find it really fun, and you can really bring your imagination in and think less about like, producing the deliverables as quickly as possible, or coming up with a set of deliverables that you normally do, and say like, what would be something creative I could do here to help them even more at the second or third tier. So
Yeah.
I find it very fun.
To tell that story to the client on the 3 tiers, do you recommend usually a call to
Mm.
story tell through those, or is it more written email or follow up with the formal numbers? Like, how are you conveying that?
That's a It doesn't matter, honestly, is the answer. However works best for you. For me, I would send a PDF email. I just send it to them. I wouldn't barely write anything in the email. I put everything in the proposal and say, "Hey, here's that proposal I promised. Uh, I'll follow up with you on Friday if I haven't heard back. Just let me know that you received it." And then the proposal would be very self-contained, so that if they want to show it to someone else, they've got everything in one PDF, and they can show it to other people and get feedback and so forth. And I recommend writing it in a way that anyone could read it, and it would be justified to the reader that the amount of money that is written at the very end, the prices at the end, make sense.
Mhm.
You put enough context in there from the conversation that any educated person would be like, "Well, it seems like a no-brainer." I mean, the 10,000 level one is like, seems amazing, but still, I mean, 22 is like way cooler. 50 is a little bit high, probably don't wanna go that high, but the $22,000 price, that one's just right, like Goldilocks.
Yeah.
So, I always did it like that. There's another school of thought that strongly recommends and has good success with the idea of just a one-page, sort of like a pricing sheet with 3 columns that has a price at the bottom of each column, and you present it to them either in person or live, on a Zoom call. Like, you get on the Zoom call, you email it then, not ahead of time, and you go through it with them, and then you say, and if you pick number 2 or whichever one you pick, I'll send over the final paperwork and the contract after the call. Uh, I didn't like that personally, but people who are good at that mode are good at that mode. My mode of just emailing it and basically forgetting about it, other than like, put some follow-ups in my calendar if I don't hear back from them. But that that worked fine for me. I think you can really do
Mhm.
it any way you want. The thing that I would caution people about, if they're planning to do it in person, is don't try and sell anything. It's too late. You had your sales call. This is a presentation of their options. I wouldn't in this I would hesitate to get into negotiation around price. In fact, I would put my foot down and say, no, these are the prices. Like if I miss the mark and none of these options are good and you want me to write a new proposal, I'll do that, but I'm not changing the prices on any of these. I'd be willing to negotiate things like payment terms and things like that. But the problem with presenting it in person for me is that, first of all, it's another meeting that I don't want to have. But the other thing is, I would fear getting pulled into a negotiation about the price. And if you're up against a really persuasive personality, it can be challenging to hold your ground. So I'm like, why risk it? Why have a meeting I don't want? They can read, and
Mhm.
if I'm do a good job laying out my case, it should be fine. And it was always fine for me. So I actually have a whole course on how to do this in this way. But Blair Enns is another person who's sort of in the pricing space for service providers. He mostly works with like ad agency types, creative agencies. And he's got a book called Pricing Creativity, where he goes through his approach. It's very different from my approach. It's still value based, but his presentation of the proposal is more like that one page, three option model. And I
Yeah.
suppose it depends on what industry you're in and what people are used to, but yeah, that's a long answer to your question. You can do it
Yeah.
however is most effective. There's no wrong way. I don't think there's one best way. There's definitely some wrong ways.
Yeah. I know if I've already got like we talked about learning your lines ahead of time, and like my line if somebody wants to argue on pricing after I've already figured out my numbers is if I could lower my prices, I would have been ripping you off to begin with, and I don't rip off people. And
Oh,
that's
that's a good one.
and they can take
Yeah.
it or leave it from there because I don't want to
Yeah.
mess with numbers and then end up screwing myself over because I'm doing math quick. But if
Mhm.
those are the numbers I was comfortable giving you, those are the numbers. And
Yeah.
if it doesn't align, then you're not the right client for me.
Yeah.
And you have to be okay with parting ways. I have used the 3-tier model and having it more like a chart because I'm more
Mhm.
visual and having that like one page, but I have pages leading into it to explain the values of each tier and
Mhm.
explaining what each tier is for and who it's for. So if like you know
Yeah.
exactly what you're doing or it's super simple if you're just doing a living room edition, it's super straightforward. You're going to have a generally open space. There's less flow questions, but if it's complicated, like, if you're doing a whole house and flow of everybody or a hospital has different flow systems, that changes the conversation in terms
Mhm.
of what you need to do and manage. But
Yeah.
I liked it at least to check my own numbers, to gut check, but at
Yeah.
least I could do a side by side, but I always felt like I needed more information to lead up to it to help explain the value of each. That I always struggle
Mhm.
with, is it better to give them a call and talk them through it
Right.
and then letting them read the information and they can go sit on it, or if there's a, email is the way to just let them go digest it and follow up later because you're often not getting paid for those initial meetings. So
Exactly.
every meeting prior to a contract, it's time you're losing that you could either be working on another project, going after another project, or, billing and getting invoicing caught
Mhm.
up. So,
Yep. That's exactly right.
um, do you have any advice for that mindset shift from somebody moving from full-time employee to that consultant role that they're now
Oh,
having to figure this out?
yeah. The main thing is when you are an employee and you first go solo, the main thing is you might think you're an architect or a freelance architect, but actually now you're an entrepreneur. You gotta treat the move as a business. You went solo, you started a business. Like you might say I'm a freelancer, you might say I'm a consultant, or you might say I'm an architect or whatever, but you're now a business owner you're basically two people. You're the
Mhm.
business owner and you're the sole employee. And the sole employee is going to get a paycheck, and the business owner hopefully is going to get some profit separate from the paycheck. It's two different things. So recognize that your salary is not your profit. It's not profit. It's a cost. It's a cost of paying your key employee. So recognize that. In the way I have people think about this is like, let you go solo, or you go out on your own, let's say, and you but you can't do the work. You have to hire someone who's just as good as you to do the work. How much would you pay that person? It'd be whatever you think you're worth, your salary as an employee. So they say $100,000. Okay, so now you're paying someone $100,000. If you don't have money left over, you, the business owner, why did you start the business? And I'm not suggesting to hire anyone. I actually think it's cooler if you don't hire anyone and you just increase your profits by getting better clients. But if you think of it like that, and you as the business owner is getting nothing out of the deal, then you don't have a business. You have a job with no benefits.
Mhm.
So be very careful of that. Your salary is not your profits. It is a cost. And if you don't have any profits, you're going to go out of business.
Well, I even think solo architects are bad at even thinking of a salary still. Like I ran an equity report for Pittsburgh and it was, to figure out salaries and firm sizes and all this stuff and, no names were sent out, but when I would reach out to some of the solo architects, some did it and was perfectly fine cuz one of the questions is what's your salary? And I had somebody say, "Well, I'm solo, so this doesn't really pertain to me." And I'm like, yes, it does. Like when I'm figuring out my hourly rate, I have my salary that I want to make plus a 20% profit on the business plus all the expenses. So
Mhm.
somebody should still come to me and maybe first year of business, it's going to be, growth. You may not hit that number, but year 2, 3, you should, the cash flow should be rolling, the project should be coming in, I should be able to hit that salary. And I should
Mhm.
be able to tell people, well, my salary is this. And oh,
Yeah.
my company is making 40% profit through the roof.
Yeah.
I can give myself a raise. Like you need to give yourself a raise. You need
Yeah.
profits to put back into the business.
Mhm.
But it doesn't count if you're by yourself and say, oh, well, I don't have a salary. I'm like,
Right.
then what
That's
are you doing
actually
with money?
very scary if I heard someone say that. But I know most people do think of it like that. But the flip side of that, or the additional thing to think about, once you separate yourself as like, I'm not an architect anymore. Now I'm a business owner who happens to do architecture. Then you also should hopefully are going to recognize that there's a craft to building a business, just like there is a
Hmm.
craft to learn how to become an architect. You need to learn how to be a business owner. Business owners have to worry about things like payroll, marketing, operations, overhead, all of these things that you never had to worry about as an employee. Like, to all those employees
Yeah.
out there that think their bosses are don't do anything and they're doing all the work. It's like, well, the stuff the boss is doing is invisible to you. And when you become the boss of yourself, that stuff just the need for that stuff doesn't disappear. It's still there. And if you don't do it, you're gonna end up and it happens all the time. Like 18 months in, they're like, wow, I haven't had a lead in a while. Or I'm losing money on every deal because I have to undercut these competitors.
Hmm.
So there's all these business problems that'll crop up. And just like architecture or software development, there's a craft that you can get good at to running a business, and ignoring it is going to blow up in your face 100% of the time.
Yeah, and if you're not keeping track of it, because it's like I need trackers just to know where it is. Because if it's for me, if I look at just the end of the year, I can't understand the math leading up to it. Like I need to
Mm.
have mini goals for myself. It's hey, I need to do X number of proposals because I know my pipeline is going to run out if I'm not
Right.
fueling the pipeline. I
Hmm.
need to make sure I'm invoicing. Let's already carve out time on the calendar to do invoicing, even though I hate it.
Yeah.
And how
Well,
can I
get paid up
automate
front,
it?
then you don't have to invoice.
Yeah, and
That's what I
people
did.
don't even do retainers up front. I'm like, well, I'm not opening up a Revit model until I get a retainer up front to have startup cash to get going.
Mm.
And if I can even do invoicing automated, that then I'm only going in there once and I know how much I'm going to invoice out every month,
Mhm.
then I don't feel as bad and I can kind of get over myself with psychology. But it's you got to do it or you're not going to get paid because it's going to take time to get the invoice payment and you need cash to pay for food and gas and everything. So,
Yeah, the feast famine cycle is the result of not doing the stuff you just listed. So, like, if you don't do that, and anyone listening, the feast famine cycle is horrible because what happens is you go solo, you don't have any work, you email everyone you know, you get some referrals, you get too many referrals, you take them all, they're all different jobs, you're totally slammed with client work. You don't do anything to create your pipeline, like you said, and then 3, 6 months later, the projects are all over and you're back to scrambling again because you don't have any clients because you haven't done anything to create a pipeline because you were too busy with client work.
yeah, and actually
It's
getting the
sickening.
job done.
Yes, it's a nauseating roller coaster ride.
Yeah. And I like always wrapping up my podcast with this final question. And it's what advice do you have for a young professional just starting their career? So obviously they're not going to start out being solo by themselves. Many
Probably
will
not,
get
right.
years of practice
Mhm.
learning the trade. So if they had solopreneur in their head in the future,
Mm. I would
what
start a
advice do you
mailing
have
list. Start a mailing list. Yeah.
of potential clients
I would start
or
a mailing
just
list that would be read by the kinds of people you'd like to someday serve. You probably don't if you're that early in your career, you might not even have enough experience to know that. So in that case,
Mhm.
I would start writing an email list about something I was really passionate about that's related to the reason you chose that as a job. So it could be something like maybe you're a total maniac about passive homes or high energy efficiency or something like that, and find just write about it. And if you write about it a lot, then your thinking is going to crystallize around this subject. You'll find that you don't know as much about it as you thought you did,
Mhm.
and because people ask you questions that you can't answer, and it's not that you don't know it; it's that you don't know how to answer the question in a satisfying way. So it really clarifies your thinking, it deepens your expertise, and it'll start to position you as an authority at that thing. So you're starting to create a reputation for yourself as a specialist in a particular kind of thing. And if I could take a time machine back to when my one and only corporate job, I wish I had started a mailing list back then. And I would have been writing about technical things about my industry. So like kind of like writing for my peers instead of for my
Mhm.
clients. But it's better than nothing. So I would start doing that. Definitely start a mailing list.
Yeah. Plus, it takes time. Like I know I'm in year 3 of mentorDINO, and
Mhm.
that trains architects on how to be architects. Then I have my newer business, which is an architecture firm, and I don't have a mailing list on that side. But mentorDINO, it took time and
Yes.
posting regularly. And now when I talk to people, they're like, "Oh, I love this post, and you always feel like you're in my head, and I love this
Yeah.
cartoon explanation." So
Same.
it takes time to get there. And
Mhm.
so when I first started posting regularly and just writing, I had no thought leadership behind me. But
Mhm.
now when they see my logo or they hear my name or see something, it's nice that people are like, "Oh, they recognize you for it." And I
Yep.
was still working as an employee during all of those posts. So it's building it up because you can't go from nothing to a company.
Nope.
Like it would take too
Yeah.
much time.
Yeah, it's I call it gardening. You can't plant seeds and have tomatoes the next day. It's like you need to do a little bit every day, and eventually you're going to have a ton of tomatoes. And yeah, it can take a while. So while you're still getting a paycheck and you don't have to worry about all those other businessy things and creating a pipeline and all that other stuff, at least start to carve out a kind of thought leadership area for yourself to become there's a lot of experts out there probably, but there aren't a
Mhm.
lot of recognized experts, and that's how I define the word authority. So if you become an authority, a recognized expert on a particular thing, that will serve you very well when you do eventually if you do eventually go solo.
Yeah, and you never know. I never thought I'd start my own firm. So
There you
But
go.
I wanted to thank you, Jonathan, for taking the time to speak with me. I know this is a hot topic with everybody in the AEC industry. And if anybody's looking to get a hold of you or find the books you've written or your courses, what's the best spot to find you?
Yeah, we talked a lot about value-based pricing today, so I'd probably send people to valuepricingbootcamp.com, and that'll redirect you to a page on my website that where you can sign up for a free 6-day email sequence. And that's replying to any one of those emails goes straight to me. I don't have any employees. I don't have any other email addresses. So that's a really good way to kind of get a sense of if this might be a good fit for you, value pricing, or maybe productized services or some of the other things I talk about. And then just reply to any email and I'll get back to you.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. So I want to thank you again, Jonathan, for taking the time to speak with me today. It was
My
great to learn
pleasure.
from you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
I hope you enjoyed our discussion today. Learn some advice to take with you and see how our industry is all tied together to create the world around us. Check out the description below for any links or resources we discussed. If you liked the episode, please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. Give me a thumbs up and leave a comment below. It really helps others be able to discover this resource and support finding that career path that best works for them. If you know someone that has inspired your own career that you'd like me to interview, let me know in the comments below, or you can reach out to me via my website or LinkedIn. I'd be happy to share their story or your own. Thank you again, and I cannot wait for the next career story I get to share with you next week.